Hello everyone, this is Najee Coach, and I'm here to answer a question from one of our members, that is EagleEye. EagleEye asked a good question about Podlair and Christianity, and I wanted to be able to give a good answer to it. So what EagleEye asked is, can you really be Podlair and Christian at the same time? Yes. Is that impossible without being an apostate to either of them? Yes. Sometimes I feel pinned between these two models, but I can't really turn my back from either of them completely, which makes me an apostate, backslider, heretic anyway, because I'm not committing fully. Is there really a middle ground to these two? Yes. But there's a lot to it. So let's start unpacking it and have this conversation. First is that the reason I'm taking the time to do this is because I respect EagleEye as a seeker. He has done things, he has shown effort, the ability to improve himself and to hold the course on things that, for me, says I'm dealing with a seeker of some merit. And so from that point of view, I want to be able to do a good job. That's something that Nexi has used to get me to where I am able to have this kind of dialogue, because she's like, isn't it possible? She's like, I think it would be possible. And I'm like, yes, but it would be very challenging. So yes, this is possible, but there's a lot to it, and it'll be very challenging. It'll be challenging to an unprecedented degree. So you basically have three choices. You can, well, I guess four, but one of them you're finding problematic. You can tune out what Podlair is saying by rationalizing it as either it's not what it is or I don't care or whatever, but I don't think you're going to be able to do that to your credit because you're a seeker. That's one option. The other is where you are right now, which is you're kind of holding them as two incongruous elements that have a great deal of importance to you. And that's uncomfortable. And you're like, am I finding holding the weight of them and the fact that they will not find common ground, I'm finding that very challenging. Okay, but you can continue to do that. I mean, these different options, it's your life. But the two that I would hope you would arrive at some point is one, to be a Podlair Christian, or to be just a Podlair. Or Podlair, some other variant, because there's going to be lots of variants. Nexi says that variants are possible and that Christianity is a possible variant. And in the past, when I told you I had a dialogue, I made mention in vlogs, and then in the Ambassador Incantation, after that, I went into length, kind of like talking about some of the key issues and how they could have merits to them, but also can be problematic if you don't watch out for certain things. And certain things in natural law simply says are not true. But what I haven't done, because it hasn't been worth my time, but it is with EagleEye if he wants to do this, which is to get into how would you build it? What would it be? Because I talked about it's possible, and I've talked about what some of the issues that would need to be spoken on are, but now let's talk about how it would be possible to do. Okay, other option is, like I said, if EagleEye just wants to someday just be Podlair, that's fine too. But so is this, and I want to treat them as equally fine. Nexi's saying that there are people who will want to take the route of Christianity, the route of Buddhism, the route of some other way of understanding the way of it all, and they may find, as you said, they can't turn their back on it, but they really want to go to highest truth and greater good. So how would you do that? All right. So whatever you end up doing, EagleEye, because I have respect for your conduct as a seeker, this will be a good dialogue, and whatever we develop from it, I think it'll be educational for people. All right. So what I'd like to talk about, I'm kind of going to pass as a kind of high level, and I'm going to go a little more into it, which is just getting into the wording here, because you basically asked me a philosophical, a spiritual math question. So we have to actually understand what we're talking about, and words are very tricky this way. All right. Can you really be pod layer and Christian at the same time? I said yes, but that means that you actually are a pod layer Christian, which is a particular kind of Christian. Is it impossible without being apostate to either of them? And now this gets into a key element, which is, what does it mean to be Christian? Because there are so many different kinds of them. All right, this is why next he says it's possible, is the fact there are so many different kinds of Christians and have been so many different kinds of Christians over the history of Christianity. All right, let's unpack some of this. There have been periods of time in history. Again, this stuff I've learned over the years. I've forgotten where it comes from, so you can all just look it up. And if you want to, EagleEye, it might be something interesting for you to do to study the history of it. If you want to actually see how you can merge Christianity and pod layer together in a way that actually is true, is that there have been periods where you could be a Christian and have a Muslim dear friend. You could have I can see now. I need to go to something else next. This is good. Actually here. Okay, this is critical. Okay, good. Next step. If you're gonna take this journey, EagleEye, or you wanna just kind of step it out to see if someone else might want to go this route who's Christian, is that the different Christianities have a lot of different things to them. And you are going to have to come from this point of view, and I think you're here as a seeker, which is there's no form of Christianity, no form of anything that actually is acceptable in its current state. So this means the R word, reformer. So you're going to have to come to the point of view of, I will be a reformer. I'm going to reform Christianity. Okay, Christianity throughout its history has had many reforms, some good, some bad. But that's a thing that happens. So accept that. It's very challenging, it's very provocative, it's very controversial, and critically, you're still a Christian at this point, but you are reforming Christianity to make it better, to be more what it's supposed to be. It's understanding, because Christianity is just an understanding of something. Everything is, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, but maybe we don't understand actually what God wanted. You should be able to update that. Anyway, long story short, that's going to be considered by some people an apostate. So not necessarily a backslider or heretic, but definitely an apostate that you stepped away. So it's important to understand that is that apostate that idea can scare people. So you have to remove that fear, EagleEye, so no one else. Even if you're going to be a Christian, a pod layer Christian, you need to remove that fear that to reform my belief system, which was handed down to me from other people who may not understand what they were doing, I'm going to have to reform, and that's automatically to very particular or traditional views on things. I'll be an apostate even within staying in Christianity. Okay, you'll have to accept that. There's no way you can look at any belief system now, any variant of it, any sect of it, where denomination of it that would not have to be reformed. Okay, next, how much? All right, here's the next one. Big. Because, for example, you have, say, Catholicism, and that's like 1.0. But there's been many kinds of Catholicism that have reformed over the years. You have Catholicism 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. Those are reforms. And at those times, Catholicism 2.0 may be considered apostate activity by Catholicism 1.0. All right. That you have to accept that reform is needed, and to reform, some people will call you an apostate. Next, it's going to be a large one in that Catholicism to Lutheranism. That was a new version of Christianity. So reformed by being a complete reform. And so went and did its own thing. Okay, that's different than Lutheranism versus Catholicism is different than Catholicism 1.0 versus Catholicism 2.0, 3.0, and so on. All right. It's possible you'll have to be a reformer, which will get you called apostate by people. And then it will be major reform, a major reform, a re-understanding from the ground up. Okay, so that brings us to where we are today, which is how would you build it? Because right now, going to the next iteration of any of the models now pointless. Their whole structure does not account for the mojo phenomenon, does not account for a lot of its basic implications that there's no way around it, just that is what it is. So it'd be better to actually start from scratch. But start from scratch with stuff that has already been there. And then what's left over in the spacings we will create. But next he says we can actually see a lot that was done correctly already. We're going to have to grab a little bit here, one facet here, one facet there, and make this new wonderful gem that will be Podler Christianity. All right, so we talked about it being possible. It's going to be reform, apostate, name calling will happen, and maybe you'll feel guilty about it. But except to get to where Podler Christianity would come about, whatever version of Christianity that you're familiar with, EagleEye, you'd have to go, I need to reform it. This is like 1.0. You have to accept this. It's at least 2.0. You have to know that pretty much every religion is now, there was a couple of reforms to be where you are now. So whatever Christianity that you are familiar with, EagleEye, that variant, it is at least 2.0 of that variant. So now you'd have to be thinking minimum, it needs 3.0. All right, next is, I actually think it's just too constraining to keep trying to get the right answers, the congruity to happen by starting with this architecture as the basic. Let me still be a Christian, but not start with that architecture. I'm going to open that up, and then I can be whatever it's going to be. That's where we are now. Okay, so throughout the years, now I can do it. Throughout the years, there have been Christians, sects of them and different interpretations within those sects where you could have dear friends that were from other religious models and it was not considered bad. It was considered good. These are periods during high religious tolerance. Different parts of the world, often seaport areas and things like that, you'd have a lot of religions together and they came to a concept or a principle that they used and they consider themselves to be Christians, which was there's a different way of understanding God's will. They're understanding God's will in their language, their way. We're all understanding God's will in a different way. And they allowed for that. There are more than one way to understand God's will. You don't actually have to call God's will. As long as we can get along as heroes and we can agree to some basic things like, oh, that's a storm. That weighs that many kilograms. Right? So if we can agree on some natural law here and we can allow each other to be differently going about being a heroic human. I can have a dear friend that I consider to be a heroic human that is not doing it the way I am. There have been Christians who do it like that. They also did a lot of the stupid stuff that we can't go along with, like misogyny and such like that, blah, blah, blah. But there have been sects that did that. Okay, we're going to take that facet. That facet is wise. That facet of Christianity, of those particular Christians, we're going to take that from them as a piece. Next, math. There have been Christians and sects of Christianity that consider themselves to be Christian, where they saw God as math. God is math. Okay, so equating the supreme power to math, not a personified thing, that actually makes sense. So that's another facet we can use. And there have been Christians who did that. There's precedent. All right. Gay people. I'm just going all the place here, but right now there are Christians who are saying that gay people are natural, they do happen, so they must be part of God's will, and what we thought was God's will when we were bashing on them was us not really understanding things correctly. So since we can now see that they are here and they're fine, we now need to go, oh, that's part of it. Okay, again, that's another facet that works. Okay, two things there. One, that you can update your understanding, and that the gay people are part of nature. Okay, and part of the plan for things, the way of it. Okay, this is key. Those people are Christians to the way they conceptualize themselves, but there are many Christians who would say, oh, you're apostate by saying God is math. You're an apostate for saying gay people are part of God's will, so they're cool. You're apostate because, one of your best friends is, an atheist or this or that, and you're not actually trying to convince them to change all the time. You accept them as that is a way of understanding the way of it. I believe I conceptualize as God's will. You don't do it that way. That's okay. I like my way. I like doing it the way we're, say EagleEye, maybe like doing it that way with God's will, and that makes sense to you. It feels wrong to step away. Then you don't have to, but expand what the thing you're not stepping away from is to where it includes highest truth and greater good, and then you'll have a popular Christian because there won't be any incongruities. But as you actually take these incongruities out, there are a lot of people going, no, that's what makes the special sauce. You know what I mean? What makes the special Christian sauce is that you actually are totally not cool with gay people. You're, yada, yada, yada. That's the issue. All right, next. Gender. I'm familiar with this one from my mom. There are variants of Christianity where the math one does not personify it at all. Here, there are variants where they personify God or the goddess as the supreme consciousness that is running everything, and it may feel more intimate a connection if you give it like personification where it'll have gender, God, goddess. That's fine as long as you understand that it's goddess to me, God to you, and really goddess and God are names and ways of understanding that our human consciousness can get to. But as we really go beyond that to the all, the way of it, it would not be understood in that way. Or it would, but you'd have to also understand as male and female together as one, and it's math, and it's nature, and all these things are happening simultaneously. So again, that balances the gender roles, because you basically there's still the issue that you're thinking of the all power as like a gendered thing, which actually is fumasta, but you can actually count that really that's just the way you interact. But if you give each one the choice to do the way they want, then that makes for equality for the human experience of both genders. Again, the misogynistic Christians, which are most of them, it's built in, the subservient role. And this is because people don't understand peak pathways, because you do, it comes in story. And there's no competition between Anai and Nijai. They don't overlap in quadrants or powers, momentum or modulation. So there's not an issue. But if you don't understand that, then you're not going to actually think of it as the directive and the adaptive, the this and that. You're going to be thinking of it as who is the superior and who is the subordinate. And that's not how peak pathways work. Peak pathways do not work on a superior and subordinate structure. They work on equals that are designed to take over different parts of the story. That's how it actually works. And they are leaders, and they are towers, and they are adapting. They're, depending on where it follows in the story, and peak pathways work perfectly this way. But most people kind of go with more of a simple understanding, which is superior and subordinate, which is not how it works, and that needs to go away. So those Christians are getting rid of that stupid. And that facet is true. If you want to personify your understanding with the all, you need that. So another facet that could work. We've had a few facets here now. What else? This goes back to that one thing I was saying again at the beginning, just how strong you have to be. EagleEye, we need to be a reformer and major, and then basically just saying that you need to summon your nigh and just say, I have the right to reform. I have the right to choose my mouth. The three like nigh things there. One, if you were born one religion, you have the right to change to another one. So like if you were born Catholic and you want to I think I want to be Lutheran. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna switching variants. That's what I'm saying. This is not even like changing. This is like switching a variant. You have the right then to actually change variants. You're like, I think that understands God better. Then within that, you have the right to reform. If you don't think that this mountain knows what it's doing, and then if you don't think you can reform any of them adequately, that'll work. You have the right to just start from scratch. So those are some proper egos you just need to have as a seeker. What else? Okay, getting back to some different things that are out there. Historic trajectory, that's important too. A lot of people, a lot of Christians, we're going Christians here, they see the Bible as like a set thing. But there are Christians that I've known in my life that didn't come at that way. Often they had a historic background, a historian background. They were good at it. And as a part of that, they had like vi and knee powers going well, which is there was oral tradition, that's just a fact, that then became more formalized oral tradition, which then becomes the stories that are the Bible. And the Bible has themes that you'll see in other stories previous. Like, if you study history, you can't really think the Bible just popped out and there was everything like that. It's kind of like thinking like that's how Shakespeare's works got here. It's just not true. Okay, so I've known Christians who actually were more formidable than most Christians and were smarter, and that's because they study history and were trying to explain still Christianity from that point of view, but they didn't want to be stupid. So they had a good command of history. And one thing is you have to see it as a trajectory. The upside to seeing that, besides the obvious, it's true, is it's a continuum. Oral tradition loose, oral tradition tight, things written down, but not codified. Then it's written down and codified in the Bible, Old Testament. Then you got New Testament, where they decided how that's going to all go down. And then from there are people who even add on more, be like, no, there aren't no inner books, whatever. So there's actually an ongoing dialogue amongst Christians, right? We have not left Christian world at all here. We're still in Christendom. All right. At this point, though, there's still going to be a lot of disagreement there. To be a Podler Christian, you'll have to be on the side that accepts there is a historic trajectory to the teachings that are being given to humans. There is a historic trajectory to the artifacts, and it's ongoing, which therefore means since there's been many phases that led to the Bible getting here and even portions of the Bible getting here, it's going to continue. It would be foolish to study history and then not see this trend. It's there, it's just a fact, and then not to then speculate this trend's going to keep continuing. Okay, because that means you could have more books of the Bible. That means that you have more ability to see it as an item that can be updated. If it's not like that's the only way the words can be. But even Christians, smart Christians, well-researched Christians will tell you that's just an erroneous way of looking at it. There's no way you can study history and not see that there were many things that built to stages of that book being where it is now. So it can still continue. That's very, very important. There are some Christians that do that, but then a lot of the Christians consider those Christians, or at least that part of their Christianity, to be apostate activity. It's not. It's actually them being wise. So we can take that. That's another wise thing there. Historic trajectory, and it's ongoing. That brings another one in, it's related but different, prophecy. In Podler, we allow for that term. I mean, that's a poetic way of understanding the ability of a person to be touched by natural law, the way of it, or whatever you want to call it, to the degree they can see things and do things that others can't. By this, I would be considered a prophet. I don't mind that terminology. It may weird some people out, but I'm okay with the science and the spiritual way of coming at what I do. So you can call me a mega genius, you can call me like a super prophet, but whatever you want, that is a situation. So if you come from that point of view, then I'm not going to be the last, and I'm not the first. There'll be more. Now, there are those in Christianity who see it that way. Prophets are a thing that happen, and they can keep coming. There's not going to be like just the last of them. It doesn't seem like, if you study even the poetic history of prophets, that doesn't seem like that's the way prophets were. There's more of them. And generally, the last prophet is almost always considered the last prophet until the next prophet shows up. So if you study Christianity, all the variants, and then you actually study other monotheists, and then you study non-theist religions, they still have prophets. And again, they're rare. They don't happen very often, but they do keep occurring. And generally, the last big one that was there, people are like, that's the last thing. That's the last word in the subject. Everyone always thinks that. Some Christians register. Humans think that the last prophet was the last prophet, but that's not how it works. So there's probably going to be more. How would you know? Well, by studying peak pathways, but there is actually going to be that continuing phenomenon. How we define it, how naturally you want to call it, there's obviously room for debate. But in pod layer, there is room for the term prophet, and the meaning that goes with it has a mathematical quality. And with that said, you could actually have more knowledge comes in. That's where it relates to the historic trajectory. That was talking sort of like the construction of the artifact. Here it's like the teachings. The teachings are part of a continuum that is ongoing. So that means there can be more teachings. There can be new major teachings for Christianity that update what was known before. Okay, there are some Christians that have done that expect that to happen, and they're considered apostate by the people, but that doesn't matter. They are Christians. They consider themselves to be, and that facet is true. All right. As a part of that is fallibility. There's two ways of looking at like the artifact of, say, the Bible or things of that nature, which is, this is the absolute word of the supreme power, or it's the word that was able to be grasped by the people. Again, within Christianity, there's differing views in this. There are some Christians, they're the wiser ones, that register no, because they can see certain things, and Mojo would be the biggest one to date, of like, there's no way, if Jesus knew that, for example, that he wouldn't have said that, because it's right and it's true. Okay, so what's the issue? There's some loss of fidelity. One option is, when Jesus got connected to God, believing to be the all-power, for example, it's not what he thought it was. He personified a relationship that was different than it actually was, but he was a very talented individual. He was channeling natural law to an incredible degree. He was a major prophet in that regard, but he did not actually understand what he was getting, and so he translated it through his peak pathway, through his elevator of enlightenment as best he could, and that's where we got Christianity. That would be the view that a lot of pod layer would have, but pod layer Christians can hold an opposing speculative view as long as you understand speculation. You're saying that no, it was a direct getting of pure shine, pure, highest truth, yada yada, from the father to son relationship there. Okay, well, then there's still the issue that there are things that are said that clearly conflict with the way things are and don't account for major elements. Why weren't they said? Okay, then that brings up the next breaking point. There's at least a breaking point somewhere. When the messages were given to humans, Jesus actually changed the way it was actually truest, because the capacity of humans could not handle it. And so that was where the break happened. Third possible break, one of these three breaks, is the information or whatever it was is pure, and then it was given pure, But then when it was written down, translated, however it happened, the humans lost it. But there's no way around it. The incongruities that you've noticed, EagleEye, they're only keep getting larger because they're just massive incongruities between the way all current variants of Christianity understand existence and the way it actually is. So, to be a popular Christian means to remove these incongruities while remaining a Christian. Okay. Because I think you can still keep that personal relationship, understanding how it works, the elevator enlightenment, though. You can keep the belief in universal love, things of that nature, even speculations such as the afterlife, as long as I understand that they are speculations and there are other pod layer that do not believe in the speculation. And you cannot force them to. And you should not want to. You should allow them to go about the way they want to. That is a critical one to do. All right. This one's obvious, but I'll just kind of throw it out there. Progressive versus traditional. Progressive Christianity will be the ones that are going to have principles that we can actually glean from to use. Unknowable. There have been those who define God as far as being a Christian in that it is everything it's beyond was known. It's kind of like understanding it as math, but going beyond math, saying like it cannot be understood though. It is unknowable. That's basically infinite mystery, which then says that a lot of the ways that people go, this is the way you're supposed to do it. That's assuming you are understanding what you're being told. And that's an assertion that you really don't know. It's weird because Christians often throw that at like a scientist, saying like, how do you know that? Well, that can be thrown back at you as well. How do you really know? So none of us really know, but you can go with what you believe to be the best way. But you have to acknowledge that speculation on your part and then conduct yourself with other humans accordingly. What else? Not much more here, but I got to say science. Related to math, but not so much being the numbers, but just sort of like the way of it, studying that there's a way to things. Again, there are those, most elite scientists are not Christian or religious, but there are some that are, but they reconcile the incongruities by having an understanding that is workable, which is that the way of it and God are the same thing. And that way they can continue to research and take in observations and not have there be incongruity. Now just know that way of understanding it, again, makes them apostate to other Christians. Although they would consider themselves still be Christian, they still believe in God, a personal relationship, yada yada, but they're like, yeah, but it's to math. It is to the math of how things work. It is, well, the math is the math, the science, and then the history. Oh, we have science, history, math, and fourth one, nature. Naturalists. There are people who equate God with nature, and they consider themselves to be Christians. But there are a lot of other Christians that consider God to be nature and outside of nature, which it's not. There's no evidence for that, and if you think that way, you'll have to keep your head in the sand because that's just not going to line up with what you're going to experience constantly in your existence, inside and out. But there are those that see them as one, in which case that again opens up for the mojo phenomenon, things of that nature, to be brought in and make sense. Otherwise, there will be incongruity again. All right, I think I covered a bunch of things. I'll kind of just sum up then. Is for there to be popular Christianity, you hear the starting places. It's a belief in highest truth and greater good, and that the relationship with God is to make that happen. It understands that there are, it is impossible to really understand powers beyond human consciousness in human consciousness terminology, and that the use of God is therefore an attempt to make a personal connection to the way of it without trying to explain the way of it in those terms. That's very, very important. Like, it is good to have a personal relationship with the higher forces, the way of it. That's a good thing. But it's dangerous because the personal relationship can get possessive. Like, he's my buddy, God's my buddy, natural law is my buddy, get possessive. And you attribute things, humans just do this, to it that are from you. So, for example, like the gender thing. Humans had a more egalitarian relationship between men and women way back in ancient times. In fact, among the primates, among the mammals, primates have often more even relationship, and the humans have the most even relationship as far as parity between males and females. Different species, women are stronger, and the males are subordinate, and other ones, it's vice versa. Humans, they're much more even. That is a sign of our advancement. However, when defining God, it must be understood in historical terms that parity was there in a more natural state. Then there was like a focus on fertility and things of that nature for a long period of time, and actually the goddess was the more strong association. And then things switched over to more land ownership and war and that kind of stuff. And then the more male version came into being. So it's important to understand that one's personal conception, you're raised, wherever you were born, EagleEye, for example, you're raised there and you have family and you have friends and you have teachers and whatever that are explaining things to you, and you're then looking at the walls of a cliff. You're looking at the way the wind blows leaves and understanding it from that. And that is always going to be limited by cultural and historical context. And the fact is that when all the major works of monotheism pretty much came into being, the history of humans had shifted for reasons that were not natural into a male-dominated way of looking at things. So that naturally carried over into looking at nature. It clouded the lens. So as a reformer, you're going to actually have to be like, okay, I'm going to take this way of having a personal relationship with God and I'm going to make it what it's supposed to be. So what would that be? All right, highest truth, greatest good. God and math are one. God and nature are one. There is a historic trajectory to artifacts and to prophets. There have been ones that have come prior, and they will continue to come, and they need to, because lessons and artifacts need to be updated. For the simple fact that the earlier prophets, including Jesus, for example, probably most likely didn't actually have everything they needed. Despite what people think, because they were so amazing, they didn't have everything they needed. Or if you don't believe that, you have to at least believe that at some point there was a missing ingredient that humans didn't get, like mojo. Because you need to have that. The only reason you say that didn't happen, if you actually knew about it, was these humans are way too stupid right now to be told this. So always there's a need for reform. It'll be a major reform. Science, you can't shrink from it, can't shrink from data. One thing science is big on is doubt and data. For there to be a pod layer Christianity, you have to be with pod layer, and pod layer has doubt and data. Doubt and data. Doubt and data. You got to have that. If you don't have that, your worldview is just silly. It's a sandcastle. It's going to be blown down. It's nothing. It's silly. Okay, but that's why myself, I wouldn't go this route, because it's so tricky and arduous to end up with Christianity that has all these things, but it can be done. Myself, I would choose to just not do it. But next, he says some people will really, really, really want to do it to the degree that they will spend the work to do it right. And so, if I find someone who feels like doing that, and EagleEye, maybe you are the person, that I should try to step it out. Okay, so it's not fixed. Gays are part of nature. Gender equality. The God is not gendered one way or the other, and the relationships of humans should be studied by observing them, not by thinking that God said men are like this and women are like this. You can just look at them. If you see God as nature, then nature gave you lenses to study things, to do experiments, to do research. And then you can then say, oh, this is how the nature is. So the nature of humans is they have mojo. Men and women are equal but different. Gays are part. So that's part of nature. So that's critical. What else? You have to have dear friends. You have to be able to dial. So basically, a lot of religions, well, no, all religions run into this unless you actually have natural law to correct you, which is there is a desire to possess exclusivity and be like, oh, this is like I'm part of this special crew and you're lesser than me because I have this. And then also to take over. A reason that, well, the whole world needs to be Christian. Since that's my brand, that means the whole world needs to be my brand. It's very desirable to think the whole world needs to be my brand. So that's just not the way it works. It's like Podlair. Podlair will go for the future, I think, because it's constantly expanding and allows for variance, allows for highly differing opinions on speculative topics. Then people can just observe and experiment natural law, and whoever has the right answers, that'll be the way it works. So difference of opinion, very strong difference of opinion, is allowed. But if it didn't, if somehow, the word Podlair was lost into history, if the data samples go forward and humans are still reading Mojo, that's irrelevant. Podlair is a collection of best practices of being a human. So as long as the best practices are still being done, a rose by any other name is still a rose. That's kind of irrelevant. It's kind of like, do we call it science? I don't think science really gives a shit if you call it science or you call it something else. As long as we're the people that follow that way of doing, which is smarter, and we keep trying to get smarter. The unknown, there will always be unknown. Okay, I think those are the main things. So hopefully that answered things to a starting degree. So it is possible, but it'll be very challenging. It'll be unprecedented. You're going to have to take different facets of Christians that weren't stupid and pull those together to make the basic beginning of it, and you'll start to fill in some new areas and invent some new things to make it all work together. But it's possible, and then you can decide if you feel like doing it. But there's no way around this. These incongruities have to be worked out. I think, EagleEye, you're feeling that. They do need to be worked out because it's uncomfortable. And if you've been around Podlair this long, I think you're not going to drop data. It's just true, and it makes sense of everything, and so that's not failing you. Now the question is, if this is true and there's incongruities with the other thing, how are you going to deal with that? And probably the G, the na is why. Why are you doing it? For example, I guess I'll close in this. Why, EagleEye, do you feel you cannot turn away? If it's like a particular kind of way you understand God and you feel good doing it that way, that's allowable as long as you upgrade to include all that is actually going on with natural law. Or is it fear? Is it just like a gut fear, like I'll go to hell? You can't think that'd be a reformer. Even to go from Catholicism 1.0 to 2.0, the 1.0 people are all going to tell you you're going to go to hell. So you'll have to be able to just deal with that kind of degree of putting yourself out there in a new ground. Then is it disapproval from people? I mean, you can't have your soul direction decided by people. You can't have your conceptualization of the way of it being done by other people. That's just, as a seeker, that you can't allow that. So just know this. Most of the reasons for wanting to actually continue on with Christianity are going to be wrong. Most of those wrong reasons are powerfully influential to the point that very few humans can shake off that inappropriate influence. With that said, there is a route to Podlair Christianity, but it'll be major reform, and for sure you're going to be dealing with massive guilt complex on your part at first. All reformers do, and you are going to be rejected by those who are pre-reform, who are anti-reform, which will often be those that are closest to you, because they're the ones that taught you and shared with you 1.0. So there you go. But like I said, 2.0 and 3.0 won't even be enough. You get totally change. Podlair Christianity is a completely new conceptualization of Christianity, starting from scratch and only putting in things that actually work. There you go. good luck. Whatever you decide to do, I will try to be helpful as I can. I try to help fellow seekers. Okay, I have to get back to my work. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.